Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks ever so much. My name's Jo, as we've just learned, and today is about Spoonie Kids. Spoonie Kids draws on spoon theory, which uses spoons as a metaphor for an amount of energy that can be saved or spent. Next slide, please. On different tasks. And it was inspired whilst working within an acute oncology setting with an 8-year-old going through treatment at that time for a neuroblastoma, and co-produced with children, young people and families with lived experience. So the overall aim of today's session is to create a space that allows opportunity to further develop understanding of the nature of fatigue, to support the child at the centre to live their best life, but also importantly to help manage both individually but also as a family. So the key points as shown on this slide will be covered in my presentation today. And this approach is now being used in over 20 NHS trusts across the UK and internationally, both within acquired brain injury and oncology settings, amongst others, both acute and community. Next slide, please. So I know that for everybody attending this session, this likely won't be the first time that you've come across fatigue, and that you know how at times, how complex and challenging it can be. So let's start though, by asking what is fatigue? We all know the word, it gets used in lots of different contexts, but what do we really mean by it here? For some, they might think of it as extreme tiredness, or perhaps think mainly about the physical aspects. But we now know from research that it's a multi-dimensional symptom with physical or body, cognitive, thinking, and emotional feeling components. Because of this, it's clear that there is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to what fatigue looks like, especially in children and young people who can often have highly variable levels of energy. They might look lively one moment and not look very fatigued, and then crash moments later. They might go to that physio session, practice doing steps, and later that day, not quite remember what they need to do to get ready for bed. That night, they might sleep badly, have pain or sickness. And the next day, in the same session, they're unable to do those same steps. And in this example, we see both the physical and the cognitive elements of fatigue. Often, however, the physical part, i.e. not doing the steps the next day, much easier to comprehend, both for the child and those supporting them. The understanding that there's a connection between energy exertion earlier on in the day and an inability to remember in that moment how to carry out a usual bedtime routine, however, harder to connect. And these everyday routines can often feel really complex and challenging when living with such a fluctuating nature of something as fatigue. And therefore, it can be really hard to know how best to support. Next slide, please. So let's just pause and do a quick activity together to bring in insight and learning from your own experiences. Think about your child, or a child you know who struggled with fatigue-related issues, and ask yourself, considering the three elements, physical, emotional, and cognitive, what does fatigue look like for them? How did it show up? When? And in what situations? For some children, it can primarily be thinking that drains their spoons. So questions for them can be hard. For others, it can be emotional. When they feel pressure or stress, this can then lead to physical spoon depletion, but the real culprit and drain on their resource was the stress itself. These are powerful building blocks, this reflection, in developing your toolkit and ensuring it stays useful, helpful as your child continues to develop. And remember, this is a skill and one that we keep building. So for now, don't focus on what you did, but simply continue to build on the understanding of what this looked like through these reflections. And please do share in the chat anything you're happy to, so that we can learn from each other. Sorry, I'm just checking with the right slides going on.
You have more session, you have more time?
Yes, thank you. I'm just checking you're sharing the correct slides.
Okay, Vicky, can somebody share Jo's slides, please? I think she has a number of slides to go. What slide are you on, Jo?
We are currently on a yellow background of a quickfire activity.
Oh. I'm very sorry, everybody. There seems to have been some technical issues beyond our control. I've been asked just to reintroduce Jo and her session. So Joanna is going to speak to you about the Spoonie Kids Fatigue Project. And Joanna is a specialist occupational therapist at Sheffield Children's NHS Trust in the United Kingdom. Thank you, Jo. Go ahead now.
Thanks ever so much. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name's Jo. Next slide, please. Introduction. Spoonie Kids draws on spoon theory, which uses spoons as a metaphor for an amount of energy that can be saved or spent on different tasks. It was inspired whilst working within an acute oncology setting with an 8-year-old undergoing treatment for neuroblastoma, and co-produced with children, young people, and families with lived experience. The overall aim of today's session is to create a space that allows opportunity to further develop understanding of the nature of fatigue, to support the child at the centre to live their best life, and importantly, to help better manage as a family. The key points as shown on this slide will be covered in the presentation today. And this approach is now being used in over 20 NHS trusts across the UK and internationally, within acquired brain injury and oncology settings, amongst other acute and community settings. Next slide, please. Now, I know that for everybody attending here, this won't be the first time you've come across the word fatigue, or perhaps that you know how at times complex and challenging it can be. But let's start together by asking, what is fatigue? We all know the word. It gets used in lots of different contexts. But what do we really mean by it here? For some, they might think of it as extreme tiredness, or perhaps mainly the physical aspects. But we know from research that it's a multidimensional symptom with physical or body, cognitive, thinking, and emotional or feeling components. And because of this, it's clear there is no one size fits all when it comes to what fatigue looks like, especially in children and young people who often have highly varying energy levels anyway. They might be lively one moment and not look very fatigued, then crash moments later. They might go to that physio session, practice doing those steps, and later that day not quite remember what they need to do to get ready for bed. That night they might sleep badly, have pain or sickness, and the next day in the same session they're unable to do those same steps. In this example, we see both the physical and the cognitive elements. Often, however, the physical part, i.e. not doing the steps the next day, much easier to understand, both for the child but also givers. The understanding that there is a connection between the physical exertion earlier in the day and later an inability to remember how to carry out their usual bedtime routine, however, at times harder to connect. And so these everyday routines can often feel quite complex and challenging when living with such fluctuating nature as that of fatigue. Next slide, please. So let's pause and do a quick activity together to bring in our insight and learning from your own experiences. Think about your child or a child you know who struggled with fatigue-related issues, and ask yourself, considering these 3 elements, physical, emotional, and cognitive, what does fatigue look like for them? Try to make up a pie chart in your mind of each part. How did it show up? When? And in what circumstances? For some, it can primarily be the thinking spoons that drain them. So for those children, questions can be hard. For others, it can be emotional. when they feel pressure or stress, this can then lead to physical spoon depletion. But the real culprit and drain of their resource was the stress itself. These reflections, this thinking, are powerful building blocks in developing your toolkit and ensuring it stays useful, helpful as your child continues to develop. Remember, this is a skill, one we build and we keep building. So for now, don't focus on what you did or what happened next, but simply continue to build on this understanding. And please do share in the chat anything you're happy to, so that we can build from this shared learning. And think not just about the what, how it showed up, but so what? How does what you've brought to mind so far affect both everyday activities, either the things they want and need to do, but also, and more importantly, their sense of self, their confidence, their efficacy, their connection to life and those around them? How does it affect you? Please know there are no right or wrong answers here. This learning you're doing, hold it, keep it with you. It will help with the next stages. Next slide, please. There are 4 stages to the Spoonie Kids process, and each one leads to the next. Thus, today we will mostly be looking at stage 1, developing our understanding of fatigue and how it works. Next slide, please. So one of the first and most important things to do is to develop this shared base of understanding, both with the child and everyone involved. And the terminology we will use has been adapted from spoon theory, created originally by Christine Miserandino. A spoon is a metaphor or a code word for an amount of energy. Think of it as a currency that can be saved or spent. It is a purposeful language, tangible and concrete, for young people and families to learn both how to express and better understand the impact that varying levels of fatigue can have on their lives. Spoons offers a simple yet powerful analogy that enables children to be heard and understood. So why spoons and not another of the analogies that we see used in interventions like the battery or the fuel tank? Because spoons is the only term quickly growing to be the universal term used within the adult world, developed through lived experience. And you hear it now in gyms, universities, leisure centres. There are Twitter handles, forums, hashtag Spoonie Solidarity. You see people wearing the badges with pride. And so when we start with this terminology in children's services, we can feel safe to know that this strategy takes a life course approach. Next slide, please. So although this theory sounds simple, the practice takes some consideration. We might start by introducing the concept and asking, so how many spoons do we have today? Explaining broadly that a well child usually has easily enough spoons for their day and can find more if they need it. But in comparison, a spoonie needs to plan, pace and prioritise, realising that there isn't that seemingly limitless amount that there perhaps once was. It varies from day to day. One day a child might wake up and feel it's a good day for them. They might get out of bed, have breakfast, clean their teeth, and still feel like they've got enough spoons to have a shower and go to school. The next day, it could feel like just getting out of bed takes all the spoons they have. Each day is different. And for some, seemingly small things can have a big cost in spoons. A lack of fresh air in a room, bright white strip lights, might make that doctor's appointment cost, say, 4 spoons. Whereas if you'd had the consultation remotely, it would have cost, say, 2. 2 precious spoons that could perhaps be spent later on playing with their friends. It can be difficult for a Spoonie kid to take part in social events when every spoonful of energy must be saved first for the essential tasks of life. It becomes clear then that it's a very generous thing to gift a spoon. It shows care, trust, and value in those friendships. Next slide, please. So we touch now on stage 2. What does it look like for your child? And I would encourage you, later on following this presentation to really take your time here. Play detective and begin noting things and identifying what impacts your child's fatigue. This is where the resources within stage 2, typical day diaries, can be really helpful to capture what this looks like for your child in an overall picture, because it is so individual and never without the context of life. And so to develop and see these skills and what challenges come up is one of the most powerful tools itself within the toolkit. There is no quick fix, we know that. It will take time. But the more we put in, the more we start to enjoy the process of looking and figuring out, the more we actually start to notice that we already have tools, effective tools in our toolkit. And maybe we can see ways to bring in new ones or better use the ones we already have. Next slide, please. So how to better listen to the body's signs. Have a look at this image you see here. This path, life's path, and the warning signs of a cliff edge being an analogy of the busts that can happen when we overdo it and haven't yet learnt the ways the body shows us before we hit this cliff edge. As you see in the image here for this little boy, by the time he got to the edge, he just felt awful. And he didn't have any words to describe it, just felt awful. But through the stages, through observation, he slowly learned that there were signs. His body feeling like the air was made of mud. It's harder to understand simple questions sometimes or find words to answer. Sounds, bright lights, normally not a problem, suddenly they were hard to handle. And then later, through further reflection, his heart was beating a little faster. He felt a little more irritable than his usual self. And those times that he just felt awful, the edge of the cliff, well, they started to feel a little less awful and happen a little less often because he knew better how to stay on the path and avoid such hefty busts. Within the resources provided, there are all the worksheets to help support stages 3 for the toolkit and the re-evaluation in stage 4. Next slide, please. So let me share a story of Penny with you. Penny is 4. She lives with a Neuroblastoma. Penny loves to play. She loves to dance, make mud pies, but what she really loves is going to nursery. Now, following a round of treatment, she was discharged home and she so wanted to go. But fatigue remained a daily challenge for her and her family, resulting in several A&E admissions during the year following. And over a 6-month period, despite all the strategies and support they could find, Penny only managed 3 half days in nursery. So we began with education, first with Penny and her mum, followed by the teachers, classmates, and all those involved. And it didn't take long. Posters went up, shared reflections, and Penny and her support network moved through the Spoonie Kids stages to develop her toolkit. And with this targeted approach that focused on the people around her as much as Penny herself, she quickly learned she didn't need to list a load of symptoms on how bad she was feeling to be heard. She gradually understood that she could go to nursery every week for her if she used her spoon-saving toolkit and was supported to do so. 4 times a week within 3 months, in fact. And mid-playground, Penny was whiz-popping across the monkey bars, flying down the slide, and then, before break was over, she ran over to the teacher and shared, "I've ran out of spoons, Miss Hollywood." And right there, in that small sentence, the crux of it all, she clocked it, the avoidance of a bust. And off she went for 20 minutes downtime, ready to join back in just in time for lunch. Now, these early symptoms identified, the simple, understood language accessible, strategies pre-trialed at home, and her whole world knowing how and what to support her, she learned the skills that allowed her to avoid the busts and live her life to its fullest, maximizing potential. Next slide, please. So in summary, a key aim of this approach is to use a shared language, and keep developing our understanding of our children's fatigue to help them better manage and live their best lives. It's a collaborative yet individualized approach, not prescriptive nor rigid. Each journey, each toolkit is as unique as each child and their family. The resources are for navigating this fatigue. Use the worksheets, use the visuals, anything that works for you to make it fun. Learning instead of a prescriptive process, we're learning instead key elements of how to navigate life, living with fatigue. But we all know there will be times when, despite all this, there comes a moment when somebody just doesn't get it. And so we keep safe that positive sense of self. We praise the effort, the awareness, the trying rather than the outcome, recognizing what bravery it takes in this world to speak their body's needs, those hidden needs. So then that the focus of life can cease to be on what you can't do, but instead on all the other bits, the bits you can do. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, there are resources which are available on request. You can contact me with queries or for private one-to-one work or further training through my email address. Our website is currently under construction, so it's best just to email for now. And stage 1 and its resources has been made available to you with the slides from today. So please do take this away and carry on your learning. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope you found it helpful and interesting and that you will continue to take this learning. Do get in touch if you have any questions. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today.